We will go on now to our final speaker, who is Dr. Hesham Alghannam, who is Senior Advisor and Program Director of the International Studies Program with the Gulf Research Centre in Cambridge in the UK. Please, Dr. Hesham.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here. I have to say that there are other important aspects happening in the region right now and probably in the next 20 years, other than security-related issues. But I think placing the discussions in a security framework, as others have noted, is crucial. If there is no security and no stability, there will be no economy, no trade, no mega projects, no sports events, and no exhibitions, no civil society to deal with or talk about. The region suffers from a political/security problem that needs an immediate security solution. And if I had to choose a future theme for the region's future collective security arrangements, I would say that despite the chaotic environment in the region, which is unpredictable and filled with suspicion and lack of trust, but I think that there are many positive signs to be reasonably optimistic. And I hope that the main powers of the region will be able to manage the contradictions and expectations among them in a peaceful and a constructive manner. On the bright side of things, and driven by the withdrawal, or maybe the perception of the withdrawal of the US from the region, many of the main states in the region, including the GCC states, are following a more pragmatic approach and are seeking to take their fates into their own hands. It's not secret that we're witnessing a more moderate rhetoric between many states of the region, actually most of the states in the region, not only the Gulf states. This change on the rhetorical level is certainly driven by shared interests and also shared fears. Otherwise, it would not happen. This, of course, would not be sufficient or enough to establish a security framework, but a necessary step and a much needed prerequisite for any constructive resolution or a security grand deal in the region. On the GCC side of things, despite the competition, especially on the economic side between the Arab Gulf states, a competition that would probably increase and accelerate in the near future, finding a way to deal with the expected consequences of such competition is crucial, and as it could be at certain times tough and also rough. But in my opinion, disagreements and maybe disputes to a certain limit within GCC are healthy and expected. A part of the evolvement process of the GCC, something that needs to take place to reach an equilibrium. These are not tribal sheikhs that engage with each other according to tribal law and customs, which could have been normal in the past. But not anymore, due mainly to the natural increase in popular demands and needs. These are full-fledged nation states, or at least heading into this direction. States that are trying to exit the rentier box, a difficult process, maybe near impossible, and would certainly have consequences, internally and externally, that are associated with this transformation. I said this in the past and I repeat it. Competing and attracting FDI and having some sort of a strategic political alignment among the GCC would not be something easy to accomplish. It's a delicate balance and definitely a difficult task. And it wouldn't be strange if it turns out to be a win-loss situation. I recognize the strength of the counter-argument. My colleague, Dr. Omar Awaidli, what I am suggesting is, assuming it was a loss, it would be a bearable and maybe necessary loss in the grand scheme of things. Riyadh is eager to have a Gulfi unified front, as this would assist Riyadh on multiple paths and different levels. We saw what happened with recently with Al-Qardahi incident, Al-Qardahi affair. Almost all GCC, specifically Abu Dhabi, supported Riyadh actions in a way or another. Even Qatar did that. For the GCC, this unified front would play a decisive role in dealing with major fundamental challenges facing these monarchies that are related to the structure of the region and many of the regimes neighboring and surrounding the Gulf. This is definitely not the European Union. On one hand, we have Iran, the Islamic Republic, a revolutionary regime, but not very revolutionary when it comes to the Fertile Crescent, specifically Syria or Lebanon or even Iraq. But in general, it's a regime, since its existence and since it came to power, seeks and also declares that it wants to reorder the status quo that dominated the region, a status quo that was supported by world powers, Americans and Europeans specifically, for decades. And on the other hand, we have conservative monarchies and emirates, maybe not very conservative lately in some of their foreign policy conduct, and being less conservative, unlike what the popular line of analysis would probably suggest, could actually assist in moving the region away from the zero-sum game that governed the relations between the states of the region. And it would help, in my opinion, in breaking the current stalemate that the region is stuck in. In any case, the GCC operates within this rough environment. And it's very unfortunate that in many times when these states send a rational signal or show their willingness to compromise to reach a deal, it gets picked up as a sign of weakness by adversaries. But looking forward to what key trends that will impact the region in the coming near future, I do believe that there are joint interests between many important states in the region, not only the GCC, which is part of the story, an integral component indeed, but not the whole picture. These political buy-ins are present now in a way that did not exist in the past. And to abide by my time limit, I will focus on Saudi and Iran, although the concept can be expanded to other states as well. From the Saudi side, in an attempt to create a comprehensive security framework, there are abundant evidence that the Saudis want to engage in a serious discussion and a dialogue about the region's security with not only friends, but also with enemies. A qualitatively different approach than the near past, and a genuine interest. It's a strategic goal in itself for the kingdom, because this will assist Riyadh in establishing itself as a constructive regional player, not only in the Gulf, Al-Ula comes to mind, but in the wider region also. Is this shift in approach tactical? It could be, but I do not believe so for a number of reasons, actually. First, international regional support, which is needed by Riyadh for the kingdom's security aims, becomes more plausible with this shift. Also, the kingdom has an immense and difficult project in restructuring its economy to accommodate new generational aspirations and demands, confronting massive internal demands. Good governance, and this is crucial, is critical for the Saudis and the Gulf. Add to this formula the new security reality of the region. The US security umbrella is not enough. Gulf security will depend on the main states of the region, not the US or any other external power. So for the Saudis, it's security plus economy. And I'm being very transparent here. Closing the Yemeni file and fulfilling the targets of the Saudi vision. Whatever it takes to achieve this, the kingdom will engage in. De-escalation or maybe de-confliction with Iran and with other states in the region seems a necessary step in that regard. From the Iranian side, and since we're speaking about a 20-year vision to redefine the Middle East, Iran has its strategic plan, the 20-year national vision of the Islamic Republic, which has social, economic, and political goals. And if the regime was sincerely seeking to reduce the heat in the region, and this is questionable, this ambitious plan, if serious, cannot be undertaken without a robust economy. A hostile neighborhood would be disastrous to such a plan. Also, in case of any upcoming deal with the West, it's better to have the Saudis and the GCC at least neutral to make any deal sustainable. Iran also has other rivals in the region. It's not only the Saudis or the GCC. So reducing the number of enemies wouldn't be necessarily a bad thing for Iran. Also, if you want the US out of the region, as Iran always asserts and claims, you cannot do this without dealing with the GCC concerns in a way that would increase the stability of the region as a whole. And every way you look at it, the battle with the Saudis and GCC is not cheap for the Iranians. Unfortunately, if this de-escalation or de-confliction doesn't happen, this vicious cycle will continue. Interventions from all sides will persist. Key issue here is Yemen. Everything, in my opinion, will depend on Yemen. Yemen is in deep crisis, but it could be a good starting point and a low-hanging fruit for all parties. And yes, the kingdom wants to end its engagement in Yemen, the military campaign specifically, and as soon as possible. And definitely the Saudis want the drone and missile attacks to stop. But I guarantee you that there will be no Saudi rush into a more serious turn in the talks with Iran without some sort of mutual understanding and agreement on what is needed to be done in both Yemen and also Iraq, where missiles and drones come from, and where Tehran unfortunately spends billions in addition to the network of militia it finances in the rest of the region. But Iraq and Yemen is what threatens Saudi and the Gulf most, not Syria or Lebanon. On the margin, a side note, very briefly. Again, the George Qardahi affair incident. I'm not a diplomat, so I can say with all due respect, Lebanon could be irrelevant for the GCC in its current circumstances. Geostrategically, I'm speaking. It's not Yemen or Iraq for the Saudis or the Gulf. So disengagement is easy, an affordable loss, but also important in scoring points against Iran. It's a card that can be used in any negotiations. Thus, an escalation is and was expected. Back to al-Houthi, and do not get me wrong here. I'm not suggesting that Iran fully controls the Houthi or that the Houthi has no agency. No, what I'm saying is that Iran is able to send a clear signal that it supports a ceasefire in Yemen. It would be helpful to decrease supplying the Houthi with weapons. The weapons that al-Houthi is using against Yemenis first are not made in the caves of Sana'a. If this happens, it will make a political solution more possible in Yemen. And I'm not being naive here. I'm not saying here that we should expect Iran to give up on al-Houthi with no grand deal in the region. No, compromises from all sides are needed. But the issue here, why should anyone think that pressuring Saudis and forgetting about the Houthi and Iran would end the war? There is a civil war going in Yemen. Al-Houthi is a major part of the problem. The humanitarian crisis will continue to deteriorate if al-Houthi did not stop his attacks on Yemenis. Without pressuring Iran and al-Houthi, رفع السقوف, they say in Arabic, or raising the ceiling of their demands will never end. There is no limit, and no one should expect a limit. This dilemma will continue, and whoever is fighting the Houthi, and there are many in Yemen, will not surrender. And on compromises, compare the current scene, the mess and the misery that we have now in the region, to what could be done with better relations with Riyadh, where instead of spending these huge sums of cash externally, Iran could gain a lot, not only from the Saudis, the largest economy in the Middle East, but also from other states that will engage economically with Tehran once they see Riyadh moving into this direction. With no doubt, this could be a golden opportunity for GCC and Iran. There is definitely a window of opportunity here, but especially for the Iranians, since restoration of diplomatic ties with Saudi specifically would send a clear message to the neighborhood that Iran is a regional force that we can work with. I'm not saying here that there are no major obstacles. Actually, we have many of them. To mention a few really quickly. The Saudis have great doubts in Iran's intentions and engaging in dialogue. The practices of Iran till this moment confirm these fears. The gradual shift from hostile to inclusiveness by politicians is a helpful step, but with no practical action. We shouldn't expect any actual positive changes. There is also this Iranian belief that if we solve our issues with the West and the US, this would be automatically reflected on the relationships with Saudi or the Gulf. And this is very problematic. I mean, seeing Saudi as merely a part of the Western bloc. Iran also wishes for reestablishment of relations with no concessions, and that is not going to happen. The Iranians need also to assure the Saudis and the GCC that they would commit to what is agreed upon. No such assurance till this moment. De-escalation will certainly take time, and it's not easy, but all sides realize they have no option but to reach a compromise and some sort of an agreement. Maybe not everybody, but rational actors in the region do. And I'll give a very brief example since we already discussed climate change. States in this region are realizing now that climate change, global warming is real. It's not a joke. Major industries in the world are reducing their carbon footprint. Oil exporting states such as Saudi, GCC, and Iran could lose more than 60% of their income in less than 10 years. This is a serious challenge and an existential threat that faces all countries around the Gulf, more than the Sunni-Shia divide, for instance. So in a nutshell, Iran is better off without mass protests and internal anger and maybe upheavals caused by economic difficulties. Saudi and the GCC states also will welcome a smaller defense budget and a peaceful Gulf. I will conclude by saying that expected and natural for states to compete in their sphere of influence. But pragmatism must be the norm and must prevail at the end. Without collective security and also an end to the Saudi GCC Iran conflict, there will be no security framework in the region at all. Dialogue and confidence building measures will not be enough to ease tensions and resolve conflicts. This is a total fantasy. Decrease in aggression will do. The conflict in the region was never about trust alone, but it's also it revolves around Iran's aligned groups and actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hesham, and thanks